So, dear friends, if you feel the need to stretch anything, please do before I begin the talk. So again, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to see all of your sweet faces tonight. The fact that we can't be in person, this is the next best thing for sure. So thanks for taking the time to be together. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but I think we're living in really pretty chaotic times. Seems like there's enormous amount of suffering, all different kinds of suffering, and it seems like there are a lot of mixed messages that we're getting about the suffering that's going on. It seems like a lot of the veils have been parted so we can see the inequities that exist, the big holes in the safety net, the loopholes in the Constitution, all kinds of things are becoming real clear. And so there's a whole lot for us to be just aware of and processing. And like I said, if we develop our mindfulness and concentration, it can be a huge help. I think Thich Nhat Hanh has given us everything that we need in order to navigate these waters, because the first Dharma talk I gave after all this happened, I talked about the importance of resilience, being resilient, building resilience into our system and resilience into the larger systems that we work within. And I was really happy actually yesterday. I listened to the news and I saw a couple people get interviewed and all they talked about was resilience. I thought, yay, this is exciting that it seems like that's up there in the collective. So that's a good thing. But the reason that I brought it up was because I feel that's what our practice does. That what Thai has given us are a bunch of practices that help us to maintain some clarity, some peace of mind, and be able to be solid and stable. And that allows us to be much more resilient, that when we can just respond to what arises rather than having to grasp at what we want to have happen, or worry about what isn't going to happen or what is going to happen, or make up stories about things, we can be a whole lot more centered and a whole lot more stable. So I really do think that that is one of the real gifts of the practice, is that we become more and more resilient. And I always tell people that I feel like Thai's given us a beautiful, Thai and the Buddha have given us a beautiful roadmap. And whenever I listen to a Dharma talk or I read a book or whatever, I feel like I've made a trip to like AAA and they've given me a triptych. But it's up to me to walk the path. They give me the directions, but I need to do it. We need to deepen our practice. It's going to be completely up to us. Nobody else does it for us. So one of the things that, I mean, there's a big bunch of things. I feel like all we have to do is pay attention to what's going on, and we are privy to just about all of the teachings of the Buddha every day. We can see them in neon in front of our eyes. But one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is how we take good care of our consciousness. And I don't know, I know we have a friend here from Seattle, so I'm not sure what it's been like out there, but here it's been incredibly windy. I don't know if all of you have been experiencing the wind that we have, but we're down by the coast, and the other day it was just like, it never ended. It wasn't even gusting, it was just solid, probably 20, 25 mile an hour winds all day long. And it reminded me of a story of Ty's that I wanted to share. Some of you might have heard this already, but it's definitely worth repeating, I think. He said, "One evening, I returned to my hermitage from a walk in the hills, and I found that all the doors and windows of the hermitage had been blown open. When I left the house, I hadn't secured them, and a cold wind blew through the house, opened the windows, scattered the papers from the desk all over the place. Immediately, I closed the doors and windows, lit a lamp, picked up the papers, and arranged them neatly on my desk. Then I started a fire in the fireplace, and soon the crackling logs brought warmth back to the room. Sometimes in a crowd we feel tired, cold, and lonely. We may wish to withdraw, to be by ourselves and become warm again, as I did at the hermitage, sitting by the fire, protected from the cold, damp wind. Our senses are our windows to the outside world, and sometimes the wind blows and disturbs everything within us. Many of us leave our windows open all the time, allowing the sights and sounds of the world to invade us, penetrate us, and expose our sad, troubled selves. We feel so cold and lonely and afraid. Do you ever find yourself watching an awful TV program, unable to turn it off? Raucous noise, gunfire, it can be very upsetting, yet you don't get up and turn it off. Why do we torture ourselves this way? Don't you want to close your windows? Are you afraid of solitude, the emptiness, and the loneliness you may find when you face yourself alone? We are what we feel and perceive. And he goes on to talk about the whole idea of leaving our windows and doors open. The windows and the doors, the windows are our senses. We have 6 consciousnesses. We actually have 8, but the 6 through which we take in all of our experience are the 5 senses, the taste, touch, smell, all of that, the 5 senses, and the mind is the 6th one. And so those are the windows. And we're the ones that have the ability to shut the windows or open the windows as we see fit. And we have to pay attention, and this is where mindfulness comes into play. We need to pay attention to what we're allowing to come in our windows. And depending on what we choose to allow in, determines how we're conditioning our consciousness. If we are allowing a whole lot of negativity in, and we can't protect ourselves, like he said, just leave yourself wide open. And he goes on to say, losing ourselves in this way is leaving our fate in the hands of others who may not be acting responsibly. So whenever we just leave the windows wide open and we're just watching things or listening to things or just allowing whatever to blow through, we're not taking good care of our consciousness. When we develop our mindfulness, we're able to see that for what it is, and we're able to choose what to allow in and what not to allow in. And we can also allow wonderful things in and water the highest and best seeds in our consciousness. And it's not about shutting your windows off to any kind of sadness or any of the more difficult emotions. That's not what this is about. It's important for us to know what's happening in the world. It's very important that we know. But we need also to have enough compassion for ourselves to be keenly aware of what our capacity is and not to outstrip our capacity. And everybody might have different capacity, and everybody has a different capacity depending on the day. Some days I have a great big capacity, some days not so much. So we need to be able to be mindful enough to notice, I don't think today is a good day for me to be exposing myself to too much of this. Or perhaps some other days we can. But the bottom line is that we need to make good choices. And Ty talks about the wholesome things that we can take in. He said, around us, life bursts forth with miracles. A glass of water, a ray of sunshine, a leaf, a caterpillar, a flower, laughter, raindrops. If you live in awareness, it's easy to see miracles everywhere. Each human being is a multiplicity of miracles. Eyes that see thousands of colors, shapes, and forms. Ears that hear a bee flying or a thunderclap. A brain that ponders a speck of dust as easily as it does the entire cosmos. A heart that beats in rhythm with the heartbeat of all things. We are tired and feel discouraged. When we are tired and feel discouraged of life's daily struggles, we may not notice these miracles, but they are always there. And he talks about looking at an apple tree and seeing what a miracle that is. He said, it's exactly the same with the people that are around you. Under the influence of awareness, you become more attentive, understanding, and loving. And your presence not only nourishes you and makes you lovelier, it enhances those that we're with as well. Our entire society can be changed by one person's peaceful presence. Our minds create everything. The majestic mountaintop, the brilliance of the snow, is you yourself. When you contemplate it, its existence depends on your awareness. When you close your eyes, as long as your mind is present, the mountain is there. Sitting in meditation with several sense windows closed, you feel the presence of the whole universe. Why? Because the mind is there. If your eyes are closed, it is so that you can see, you do it so that you can see better. The sights and sounds of the world are not your enemies. Your enemy is forgetfulness and the absence of mindfulness. So it's really important that all of the wonders of life are there. But when we are caught in our own suffering, when we're caught in our worries, concerns, whatever, we can miss them all. And so this is why he says all day long, every 15 minutes, come back to yourself and breathe to your belly 3 times. And we all go, yep, intellectually that makes good sense. Makes sense. We can calm ourselves down. That would be really nice. And intellectual understanding counts for nothing. Like I said, it's the roadmap. It's not the trip. And it's up to us to actually practice. So we need to stop every 15 minutes and breathe to our belly. And what happens then is that we catch ourselves and we go, wow, man, I've been ruminating about whatever this is for the last who knows how long, and I need to just be right here, right now. I need to be in this present moment right now and appreciate what's happening right now. It's not easy for us to do because we've been powerfully trained to be human doings, that we don't feel like we're worthy of being on the planet unless we have something to show for our time. We need to be producing something always. And that's a fallacy. A little girl asked Ty one time, what's the purpose of life? And he said, it's to enjoy all the wonders of life. Now here is a man who's written over 100 books, given zillions of talks, traveled all over the world, done retreats for Congress people, business people, everybody. And he's telling us to stop. He said what's necessary for him to be able to have done all that he's done is that he comes from that place of clarity and peace, that he said for every hour that you spend learning things, you need to spend 7 hours practicing them. This is totally radical for us. One of the things I noticed was after the shutdown, people became just as just as obsessed with grasping what was online as they had been with what's in the world when we weren't shut down. So in our daily life, we're like kids in a candy store. We have so many options. There's so many wonderful things we could be doing. And we want to do them all and we can't. And so we have to just go from one to the other to the other. As soon as we had the shutdown, I talked to people who were spending 8 hours a day on Zoom. That there were so many beautiful offerings, that there are all these teachings. There's Qigong, there's Tai Chi, there's workshops, there's everything. It's just a real candy store. And we're just like kids in the candy store. And so that's another reason why we have to be The Buddha likened it to monkey mind. He said it's like a monkey in a tree that sees a luscious fruit and goes after that fruit. And they go, oh no, but there's a better one over. Oh no, I'll go for it. No, there's another one. And just keep ourselves jumping from fruit, from tree to tree. And we need to stop. We really need to stop. Tai says, we have a tendency to think in terms of doing and not in terms of being. We think that when we're not doing anything, we're wasting our time, but that's not true. Our time is first of all for us to be. To be what? To be alive, to be peaceful, to be joyful, to be loving. And that is what the world needs most. So, when he said in the reading that I did, that all it takes is for one person to be able to be peaceful, he's talked about that a lot, that when he was with the boat people, the Vietnamese boat people, he said that it was just absolutely hellish that they were attacked by sea pirates because all the people fleeing had all of their earthly possessions, all their most valuable things with them. And so they were a real target for sea pirates. And it was just really a hell realm. And so he said that if one person on the boat could be peace, it would affect every other person on the boat. So those of us that maybe feel that right now we're not doing a whole lot, if we're deepening our practice, if we are cultivating our capacity to come back, if we're deepening our mindfulness and our concentration, so we notice when we're being dispersed, when we're thrown off balance, when we're watering all the seeds of anxiety or fear in our consciousness, and we can notice and stop and choose to water some wholesome seeds in our consciousness. We are hardwiring that capacity into ourselves. And this situation that we're in, I believe, is not a sprint. I think it's a marathon. I think this will be going on for some time. And I think that it's going to be very valuable. When Tai said to be alive, to be peaceful, to be joyful, to be loving, that's what the world needs most. And I think that's very much going to be needed. I think that our ability to listen deeply, to be fully present and be able to listen to people, I cannot imagine that every person that's been dealing with the situation in hospitals isn't going to be suffering from PTSD. I just don't know how you could do that and not be suffering from PTSD. They're going to need our love and support. They're going to need people who are able to listen and be good friends. So not to worry about doing nothing. I think what we need more than anything is to cultivate our ability to stop and get solid and be stable and be peace in the midst of all of the craziness. The other lesson that I find has been right up there for me has been, I think that all of the things that have been happening have been giving us a front row seat at the teachings on interbeing, that we truly are. That Thich Nhat Hanh named our order the Order of Interbeing, and that was in 1966. And at the time he wrote a book on the 5 mindfulness trainings called For a Future to Be Possible, that in order for us really to have a future, we need to recognize the interconnection of all of us, that none of us exists by ourselves alone. When I talked about taking a walk with our ancestors, all of them are alive in every cell of our bodies. All of their strengths, everything that they've been through. I had sent that out as well. Like I said, I don't know how many of you, I've been having email difficulties, so I don't know how many of you got the email, but somebody sent me a thing about if you were born in 1900, this is what you would have lived through in your life. And it turned out that my grandmother was born in 1900. So it was like having a front row seat for her life to really try to understand what all she had lived through, what she had coped with. And it made me feel very strong to know she's alive in me and that she'd been able to weather all of that. We all have all of those ancestors. We have the sun. The energy of the sun is in every morsel of food we eat. It energizes us, allows us to enjoy life. Without the sun, we're not here. Ty wrote a beautiful book called The Sun, My Heart, that the sun is our heart, that without it, we're not here. The rain is coursing through our veins, in our blood. The minerals of the earth are alive in every cell of our body. There's no separating out. We like to think of ourselves as this little bag of ego-centered bones. And in fact, there's really no end to us. we're just a part of all of it. And when we can understand that, and when we can understand, Ty's always said, happiness is not an individual matter. Happiness, your happiness is my happiness. Your suffering is my suffering. And we like to not think about that. We like to be thinking, when I talked about the consciousnesses, we have those 6 consciousnesses, the 5 senses and the mind. And then we have what's called a store consciousness. So we take in all of our experiences through those senses, and everything gets stored in the store consciousness. It's all the potential for everything. Between the mind consciousness and the store, there's a 7th consciousness that's called manas consciousness. And manas consciousness would be the equivalent of the ego, say. It's a filter. I like to think of it as being a filter. It's we take in all of those experiences, they get filtered through manas consciousness, and manas interprets everything, all of our experiences, as being about I, me, and mine. It's all about me. I'm the center of the universe. And that's a misperception. And so I always think of it. Thich Nhat Hanh is so poetic, and he calls manas the lover, that we're in love with ourselves, that manas is the lover. I, on the other hand, am not so poetic, and I look at it as the distortion. It's the lens through which things can get distorted. So whatever you choose, it's okay. You can pick your way of looking at it. But to me, it needs to be recognized. When I find myself getting into a dualistic way of thinking, them and us, I have to check myself. This is where mindfulness pays off and say, oops, I am them. They are me. And there is no them and us. And like I said, I think that what's happening in our world right now, it's powerful teaching on interbeing. The people that were not valued are suddenly the ones we're totally dependent on for our lives. The ones that weren't valued enough to be paid well need to be paid well. The ones that were not valued enough to be given good health insurance really need to have good health insurance. And even if you're still stuck in the I, me, and mine, you can look at it as being, right now we're absolutely taking care of each other. I try to do my best to take good care of myself so that I'm not a burden on those in the hospitals that are so burdened already. I try to take care of myself so I don't develop something that can kill somebody else. You're trying to take care, and I'm taking care of everybody by doing that. I wear a mask when I go out so that I'm not transmitting anything to anybody. I think it's such a beautiful thing of taking care of each other. One of my favorite sayings of Mother Teresa's is, if there is no peace on earth, it's because we've forgotten we belong to each other. And when we can maintain that awareness, all we want to do is make sure everybody's okay. All we want to do is make sure that everybody's loved. It's better for everybody. There's no altruism involved. It benefits everybody. So this, to me, is one of the opportunities in the midst of the horrific suffering, that we have an opportunity to recognize that we do need to take care of each other. If there are people that are not able to take care of each other because of the systems we've designed, they can be infecting everybody else. I just heard on the news, I guess, I can't even remember when it was, that in South Korea, they lifted some of the restraints that they had, and a young man went to a bunch of nightclubs one night. And in those nightclubs, he infected 1,000 people. They did the tracing and found out there were 1,000 contacts that they had to follow up on. He was a busy guy. But this is where we need to be able to recognize we are responsible for each other. And it's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. So I think that if we get to the point where we're feeling despairing, and like I said, I know the suffering is enormous. How many losses have we had? Everybody's experienced some losses. Loss of income, loss of jobs, loss of dreams, loss of way of life. And I think that they said that there's a huge increase in the amount of depression that people are experiencing, the loneliness that people feel. And so we can do our best to pay attention to those friends that we have. That's what a Sangha is for. If you're feeling lonesome, connect with somebody in the Sangha. Make a phone call, write an email. You could have a FaceTime and share a cup of tea. Whatever it is that can help alleviate that. But Mahatma Gandhi said, "When I despair, I remember that all through history the ways of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end they always fail. Think of it always." And I love to think of truth and love. Truth and love are the things that will prevail. And I think it was Martin Luther King that said, what is it? What is it? The arc of, somebody else knows it, I'm sure. The arc of justice, is it? No, the arc of humanity, I don't know, bends toward justice. Is that right? And I always have felt like we need to help that arc. The arc doesn't bend by itself, that we need to help it bend toward justice. So when we can maintain ourselves, when we can maintain our own stability, our own peace, our own energy, we don't get depleted by making up stories. Wendell Berry, in that beautiful poem about the peace of wild things, he talks about the forethought of grief, that the wild things don't burden themselves with forethought of grief like we do. And I think of that so often, that how much time do we waste making up stories about how horrible, terrible, awful this is going to be, and this could happen, and that could happen, what's never happened, and it might happen. And we wear ourselves out with a forethought of grief, when we just need to be here in this moment, bring ourselves back. Ty always says, ask, are you sure? And we're not. We have no idea. And by practicing don't know mind, we have spaciousness. It's like, to me, that's where all the creativity rests, is in don't know mind. That when I don't know what's going to happen, if I get up, I always think of children, that they get up for the day and they have no idea what's going to happen. And they get carried around by their mom and plunked down in a playground, and there's a bunch of other us. Whoa, there's other people my size. This is great. They don't have a clue. It's just all an adventure. Whatever happens is okay with them. This is just where they are doing what they're doing. When we can develop more of that capacity to look at what's transforming, what's coming about in these times that we live in, and we can maintain some curiosity and look to see what's possible here. How can I respond skillfully to what it is that's arising? Rather than try to stay absolutely glued to the way I've always been, the way I've always responded, the way I've always reacted? Can we let go a little bit and just show up for life? Thich Nhat Hanh calls it keeping our appointment with life. Because in that space of not knowing, we have all kinds of possibilities. That's when infinite possibilities open up. Look at what's happened. The world gets shut down, and I've been amazed at the creativity. Who would have ever thought, 4 months ago, that we would be meeting like this? I never would have thought we'd be meeting like this. And yet, somebody invented Zoom, and they had a good idea, and were able to help people communicate and connect all over the world. Since we've been shut down, I've been so delighted by all of the artists and all of the families that have figured out ways of entertaining themselves while they're shut in, and people that are sharing their joy with other people, people that are singing together and making these videos of whole choirs because they can't sing in person. But we just really, I think that this situation is going to require some real creative problem solving. And the more open we can be to all the possibilities, the better off we can all be, I think. Let's see. It's been such a while since we've been together, and so much has happened. And I felt like I really wanted to share some things with you, but I will limit myself because I do want to hear from all of you tonight. And when Mahatma Gandhi said truth and love will prevail, my friend Rumi said, by and by, love becomes not a relationship, it becomes a state of your being. Not that you are in love, but that you are love. And this is what our practice is about. That we need to be able to keep our hearts from hardening, keep our hearts open. There's such divisiveness in our country right now that it's easy to click right into dualistic thinking and to create a them and us, and that's exactly what we don't need right now. That's probably one of the worst things that we can do because it's going to require everybody. And there's a wonderful, let me see if I can see, yeah, there's a beautiful quote by Thomas Merton. Our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy. That is not our business, and in fact, it is nobody's business. What we are asked to do is to love, and this love itself will render both ourselves and our neighbors worthy. So I like to look at that, and Thomas Merton was a very good friend of Ty's. I like to look at that as being an invitation to mind my business in the highest sense of the word. Mind my own business. Instead, just like St. Francis would say, instead of looking for love, learn to love. How can I be a better lover? How can I maintain an open, loving heart? How can I see people who are angry and maybe being hostile as being really deeply wounded? How can I see them for that? And Desmond Tutu said, when love is the way, poverty would become history. When love is the way, the earth will be a sanctuary. When love is the way, we will lay our swords and shields down by the riverside to study war no more. And when love is the way, there's plenty of room for all of God's children. So, dear friends, I hope that I've offered you something that might help you weather the storm that we're in a little bit. And I hope that you'll find yourself loving everybody. It's so much more fun than not. Okay. And so now we'll have some Dharma sharing. And